So how do you balance a champion differently for different MMRs? So different MMRs have different things that are good. And that's usually based on the capability of high MMR players or the lack of capability of low MMR players. So as an example, champions who are weak to grouping and being stunned tend to be much worse than high MMR, because high MMR players are pretty good at working as a team and grouping up and focusing people down. So characters like Master Yi, many assassins, tend to fall off in the highest levels of play, because in the highest levels of play, if a Master Yi is popping off, you just group up and stun him and you win. But in Iron, no one's going to do that. No one knows to do that. No one knows how to do that. Other examples are differences in game time. High MMR games tend to be shorter because high MMR players are fairly good at ending games that they're winning. The higher MMR you go, the better you are at like taking leads, pushing advantages, and causing games to end. So in a high MMR game, characters that are late game focused tend to be, on average a bit worse, because high MMR players like really value like early power and the ability to end games. So as an example, if you wanted to buff a champion for high MMR, buff their level 1 stats. If you wanted to buff a champion for low MMR, buff their stats per level. Low MMR players are much more likely to get to late game and therefore be level 18 and get full advantage of the stats per level, whereas high MMR players are much more likely to take advantage of early base stats differences between champions to gain advantages and win their lanes. Other things to think about is stuff like APM. High MMR players are better at piloting their champions in certain ways. And then another thing to think about is agency. High MMR players are much better at exploiting a character's ability to outplay. A high MMR player is going to be better on Ezreal and have a better ability to exploit what Ezreal does than a low MMR player. Same with a character like Kai'Sa, same with a character like Zeri. And so there's specific things you can tune and balance around a character to make them better in high MMR. As a really hyperbolic example here, Garen would be better in high MMR if we gave him a dash. Giving Garen a dash would be a high MMR, like, tilted buff. Now, would it still buff him everywhere else? 100%. Obviously, a dash is just good in general. But it would likely be tilted towards high MMR because high MMR players would be better at, like, abusing a dash on Garen. Even just the slight difference of a dash going over walls. We buffed Wukong's W to go over walls one patch, and he took over high MMR jungle and pro play. And it was purely because the difference in versatility between being able to go over walls and exploit what that means versus not was like a very high MMR focused buff. Now, going back to this Garen example, so let's say we gave Garen a dash to make him better in high MMR. The question then is, what would Garen have to be to lose? Because now he would be balanced around having that dash. And one of the things that I often talk about is why is it potentially not the best idea to say buff a character like Garen or Master Yi or whoever for high MMR? One of the potential like bad outcomes of that is, okay, you buff Garen, now he has a dash. What do you take away to make that fair? And the end result might be a version of Garen who is less fun for Garen players, because I guarantee you, a lot of Garen people aren't playing Garen to dash around. There's other characters that they could play to do that, like Yasuo. They're playing Garen to walk up to you, Q you, E you, ult you, you're dead, haha, I'm Garen, funny sword guy, right? And so a lot of ways we could add versatility and agency to Garen. The end result of then balancing him around those changes have a very high likelihood of making Garen less fun for the high MMR players who for the low MMR players who already like him. And that's the danger of, like, say, buffing a character like Garen or Neferi for high MMR. So I've played so many games that the way I evaluate games is basically, I buy the game, I play the game, was it an experience that felt like my money's worth? What I mean by feel like my money's worth, right, it's like, I think a lot of people have this idea that time equals worth, right? But like, I actually disagree with that, because many games are just art and just, are good experiences. So like, as an example of what I'm kind of talking about here, is a movie you paid $15 to go watch worth it, right? You only watch it once. That's only an hour of time, right? Compare that to a game like Team Fortress 2, where it's literally free and you could play it for hundreds of hours, right? And for a lot of people, the answer, of course, is, well, yes, because if you went and watched that movie and you paid $15 and you really liked it and it was an enriching experience, that was worth it, even though it was only an hour and a half. And so I view games in a similar light, where it's like, it's not about money per hour. It's about, was the experience you gained worth the price of admission? And so I think that's the question to ask for me when like a game like this is like, hey, I'll give an example, Diablo 4. Diablo 4, I got the expansion. I played it for like 15, 20 hours, had a good time, and then I'm probably not going to play it again until maybe a new expansion comes out. For some of you, that might not be worth it, because for some of you, maybe what you're expecting from a game from like Diablo 4 is like a 1,000-hour experience. For me, though, it was like, I bought the game, played for 20 hours. Those 20 hours were really good time, fairly memorable, a lot of fun. It was worth it to me. And so for me, a game like this, it's similar, where it's like, you know, I'm going to get it, I'm going to play it for, you know, some amount of time. And will I come out with like fond memories looking back and be like, that was good. I'm glad I spent that money. And I'd say so far, Path of Exile 2 has been worth it. We'll see how it goes, you know, in the long run, though. And maybe that's like another way to like think about the evaluation. And again, this is how I do the evaluation. It's going to be different for anybody, any given person. I like kind of like do the evaluation in terms of like looking back, am I glad that I spent that money, right? And if the answer is yes, then it was probably worth it. And if the answer is no, it's like, well, you know, probably not. This is also how I generally feel about like cosmetics and stuff. Like, you know, folks will, you know, rightfully sometimes, you know, be, you know, frustrated with the price of any given cosmetic, right? And I think the thing to remember or ask the question of is, for the people who got that cosmetic, do they look back at that cosmetic and be like, yeah, it was worth it. This was worth the money I spent on it. And if the answer is yes, like I think that generally represents like a good thing. So like as an example, I think an example of this that I think works pretty well is legitimately many of the gun skins in Valorant. Valorant gun skins are very, very expensive. Like, you know, they cost a lot. But generally speaking, when people buy gun skins in Valorant, they often look back at those skins they purchased and are often like, yeah, I'm pretty glad that I got that skin. It was worth it. It was good. It was cool. And so, yeah, I think that's the question to ask, is basically, what is, when you look back at something you got, was it worth the money to you? And, you know, different people are going to have different, oh my God.